Greetings. Welcome to GPT, Grace People Talk. Hi, I am Mrs. Nalini Guru, and along with me is my husband, Pastor Guru. And we are here and on a different setting, and we are here to talk about a very profound topic. And we are growing in the understanding of this topic, but thank God for people who have gone before us and have penned down their wisdom, and we've gleaned and we are gleaning as we are growing in this. And also that we have examples who have gone before us, who have lived out this, and who are still living out this topic. So you must be wondering, what is the topic? Yes, it is about parenting. I remember that when God made and He established in Genesis 1:28 the institution of marriage, He did say that He says that He blessed them and He said, "Be fruitful and multiply." So we really see that God's plan was very much for the family unit, and it was one of the institutions that He had ordained. And what we amazingly see is that He says, "Be fruitful and multiply." And He authorizes the same thing in another part of the Bible in Psalm 127, where He says that children are a heritage of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is His reward. And it also says that they are as arrows in the hand of a mighty man. That's amazing. And happy is a man who has his quiver full of them. That's amazing. But if we really see, because it's God's word, it does say that, yes, happy is a man who has his quiver full of arrows. But if we look at the daily grind as a parent, we see that, say, if you take as a mom, when you see the house unclean most of the time, or like so much of laundry to be done, or the mundaneness of every day, the finances are running low, or there is not much for lunch, and it's been a long time since you've taken a break and had time for yourself. In the mundaneness and in the grind of the details in parenting, where do you think, I want to ask you, as parents, we can miss out the bigger picture?
Yeah, so as you pointed out from the psalm, it says that the children are the gift, and at the same time, they are also weapons in the hands of the parents to be sharpened and to be used correctly. But the beginning of the psalm gives us the answer. Unless the Lord builds the house is the labor is in vain. And then it says, unless the Lord watches over, the watchman is kept awake in vain. And then the second verse of the psalm, it says that sometimes we could be very anxious in our toil and go not getting rest. And but if you know that it is God who has given the children as gift in the hands of parents, and that settles a lot. The owner of the children is God. The ownership belongs to God. Then where do the parents come in? The parents come in as stewards, right? God has given the children into their hands, and they are the stewards. When they realize this, then they will know their limitations slash responsibility. So I don't have to assume too much of responsibility on me and then get condemned. At the same time, when I'm limited in doing something, and I can always go to God and seek help from God. And it is important. And when we do that, we know how to sharpen the arrow. Basically, they are children. And the last verse of the psalm ends it beautifully. And when the enemy comes, then you're not going to be ashamed, right? So, of course, Satan, who is God of this world, is against marriage and against the institution of family. And when we have identified it is God who gave and it is God who is going to help us, and when we go to God time and again in the midst of all problems, then we are not going to be ashamed in front of Him.
Wow, that is amazing that the other comfort that we can also have as parents is to know that, he is a parent. He calls all of us his children. So if he deals with us with much wisdom and kindness, I think that is also a great hope for us, that we can learn from him. And also viewing all the time, bringing him into the picture in our challenges is something amazing.
Yes.
And I remember when we brought our first daughter, into the hands, and the joy of bringing in the newborn. And the excitement was the baby was new, but little did I realize, even as parent, what we are going to go through this phase for the very first time. And even if it is the second time for our second daughter, it was still as fresh as it is, because she is very unique in herself, and every kid is unique. So the joy, that the realization eventually came later, that when a child is born, the parent is also born, where we have never assumed those responsibilities, or must have heard and might have seen in many occasions, but to see it firsthand is a great place too. And what amazed me was the joy of the bonding years that we could have with the newborns until the early formative years. It's so amazing that they understand this language of love so beautifully. And in the Bible it does say that, in the through the lips of the babes, he will disarm the enemies. So
Yes.
I could recollect what once Pastor Shala said, however hard hearted the person might be, when they see a smiling child, a smiling baby, what, they are disarmed. And that's amazing, that how God has established strength in a newborn, or like, in those formative years, that the bonding that the parent can have with the child, which is about touching them, feeling them, hugging them, and cuddling them. Those are very precious years, right?
Yes. So in the beginning, there is not much instructions that is going on. And as you beautifully said, the child is born and the parents are also born, right? If the child is going to be 6 months old, the father is also going to be 6 months old father. And I want to point out to one particular verse from Deuteronomy chapter 6, where in verse 5, God is saying, "You shall love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might." I don't know if there is anything that is left within me. So if you take away my soul and my heart and my might, then that is me, right? So you have taken everything. And God is saying, with the full of your being, understand my love and reciprocate to my love. And if you come down in verse 7, he says, show the same diligence towards teaching the children, right? So in the beginning of our parenthood, and not much of instruction is going on, but there is the touch, right? A nonverbal communication towards the children, and they are seeing in God's stead as in God's stewards, and we communicate that non-verbal communication, through non-verbal communication, the love of God. And in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 7, it says that when you rise, when you go to bed, when you walk, and when you sit, and create an awareness of God in the life of children. And that happens for a long time. And this nonverbal communication of the warmth of God is communicated, and God is asking us to do it as His stewards. Uh, that is very, very important to consider.
Yes, wow, that's amazing. I think this constant communication also causes them to respond to us, and I think God has been very, very gentle with us, that initially, even when we got saved, I think all of us will have that witness of the joy and the love that was overwhelming inside us. And there was nothing much you couldn't have. You didn't know any doctrine, or you didn't know anything at all, but the joy of becoming a believer and tasting the love of God. And then, God doesn't stop us there, and He wants us to live in that nonverbal communication all through. But He takes us through the next stage of, He starts to communicate verbally through His word, and through His man, and through the church, where we can be instructed and have our boundaries defined. That is amazing.
Yes, yeah. At one point in time, we are shifting from non-verbal to verbal, right? So the child is beginning to understand instruction, and then we begin to communicate to them verbally and also non-verbally. And that is what Jesus did with his disciples. In John chapter 1, verse 17, Apostle John says what Moses could do is Moses could actually take the law and give it to people, right? And he couldn't do beyond that.
Yes.
But in the next verse, it says, John 1:18, no one has seen God at any point in time. The one who has been with God and the Son of God, he has revealed the Father unto the disciples. Right? So he went beyond Moses. Moses could not go beyond the law, but Jesus could actually go beyond it. And he has revealed the Father through nonverbal communication slash verbal communication to the disciples. And the disciples said, oh, we have begotten the glory of the one, right? The Son of God Himself, and the impact of it is also communicated in First John chapter 1, in the first four verses, and where Apostle John is saying that we have seen with our eyes, right? And then he says, so we have looked upon a little bit with intensity, and then he says, so we touched, and then he says we heard. Now he is talking about the verbal communication, the word of life. I mean, they got to touch the word of life, and they also got to hear the word of life. And so much so that in John 14:9, Jesus looks at Philip and he says, the one who has seen me has seen the Father. So now we spoke about the stewardship of the parents, right? So God has given this particular task of creating an awareness of Him. In Deuteronomy 6, verse 7, we saw that in the children, and He is asking the parents to do it. And little bit like we, like Jesus, and through nonverbal communication, and we do it, and then we begin to do the verbal communication and also the nonverbal communication when the child begins to understand the instruction. And I want to quote another verse at this junction, and that is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 20. And look at this verse. This is a mind blowing verse. And let me read that for you. When your son asks you in time to come, what is the meaning of the testimonies? What is the meaning of the statutes and the rules that the Lord our God has commanded you? And now the children are beginning to ask questions. They are asking, why are you giving these rules and regulations? Why are you asking me to do some things? And why are you asking me not to do something? When such questions come from children, and we don't have to say that do it because I tell you. No, that is wrong. Then you become the ultimate lawgiver, right? So what does the rest of the verses speak? 6 verse 21. Then you are to say, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us through his mighty hand. And then you ought to talk about the signs and wonders which God has performed in Egypt against Pharaoh and against all his household before our eyes. Then God brought us from Egypt into the land. So, what are the parents to rehearse? The parents to rehearse about slavery, the parents to rehearse about the God of this world, who is right as Satan, and the type of him is basically Pharaoh, and the parents to rehearse the redemption story. So why the rules and regulation comes in a person's life? Because we are sinners,
Yes.
right? And it is God who has redeemed us. So not only am I to give the rules and regulation as a father or you as a mother, but it also coupled with the redemption story. When you talk about rule and you talk about the redemption story. When you talk about another rule and then you talk about the redemption story, it goes hand in hand, as God has explained beautifully what the parents must be doing. And when the verbal communication begins, the redemption story also begins. And they get to see God as the primary and ultimate lawgiver. Not just that, when they fail in the rule, or when they fail not in their weakness, not able to do it, and they also will see God as the
Redeemer.
redeemer. And then our task is over. And in the first stage, you are creating the consciousness of God. In the second stage, you are bringing in the submission, and an awe is created, a reverence is created in the hearts of the children.
Wow, that's amazing. I remember many a times this was the saying that many a times people think that kids are like, carrots planted in the garden, they'll grow by themselves. But having you said that, the preciseness in which God has expected us as parents to not only bringing the awareness, but also reveal his heart, not only of what he desires in terms of righteousness and holiness and justice, but at the same time also reveal the redeeming heart of God, that as imperfect as I am, God would come still to rescue me.
Yes.
And that creates in them a tremendous capacity as they see, get to taste of their own depravity. That's
Yes.
amazing. But the point is, sometimes, when the inability of the parent is overwhelming. Say the kid is so naughty, and then they don't listen to instructions, and then the first reaction eventually turns out to be that, I would point it to myself, say, either yell at the situation, or like, trying to set it right, and bring in the order because I am the mom, or like, and after that, the aspect of guilt that overwhelms, that, oh, maybe I should have not reacted this way, but nevertheless I would, at least in the initial years, would not condescend to say a sorry for my imperfection, imperfect display of the reaction in that situation. But that brings us to this place where, are we adequate as parents? Did God really do a mistake by giving, such a precious child into our hands? Or is that what any parent would feel?
Yeah, so as we spoke about this in Psalm 127, and they are the weapons and they are also the gifts that are given by God Himself. But one thing we need to know that none of the parent is adequate, right? So I have yelled at my children and I have gone to them and asked sorry. All right. The power of the sin is broken, but the nature of the sin is still present in me. But I need to know that God has not called me as an adequate parent, and God has called me as an inadequate parent. And why did God calls the inadequate parent and gives the gift and the weapon to be kind of like shaped up? Because there are no adequate parents exist, right? That has been the story of the Bible. When God called Moses, what did he say in Exodus 3? He said, I am not adequate. And when God called Gideon, what did he say? He said, I am not adequate. And it is the same case with Jeremiah also. He said, I am too young. But Apostle Paul says, our sufficiency, our adequacy comes from God. So when I understand that I will fail and I am bound to fail, and I would also know that I need to go to God and I need to receive the strength from God, and the parents will be seen as sinners by the children. And when we communicate that inadequacy, and at the same time, God has put me in this place as a delegated authority, when the children get to know, there is a transparency that comes between the parents and children. I don't have to act as a self assured parent, or I don't have to put it across to my children that I am adequate. And that is going to be the dangerous thing that I could actually do to my children, and then I they will find out that I am hypocrite.
Uh, but Can I be a self-assured parent, say, in terms of like, say, I know what I want them to study, or, about, say, teaching on cleanliness and things like that, where I am very firm about certain things to be learned. There is a self-assuredness as a parent that I need to execute. But where is it that I can go wrong and miss the bigger picture?
So if I act as a self-assured parent, I mean, let me be very clear. If I act as if like I'm not the one who is going to fail, and I am adequate, and I am almost on my top, and when I communicate such a picture as a father, or when someone communicates as a picture as a mother in the family, and it is possible that we would actually expect the same ability from the children.
Yes.
And when the children are not able to produce the ability that I have, and then I could actually condemn them, and I could display myself as the lawgiver, right? I don't understand their weakness. There is no condescension, Jesus condescended from heaven, and he was perfect. At the same time, he never exacted the same perfection from the disciples, and he did tell that to Peter that you will deny, and you guys are going to run when the shepherd is going to be stricken. And we fail to understand the weakness of the children. We fail to condescend to their level, and it's a deception. Just like a self-assuredness, self-righteousness, none of us is righteous. We don't have the acquired righteousness with us. So nobody is righteous, right? We all have fallen short of the glory of God. So just like self-righteousness is a delusion, and similarly, self-assuredness is also a delusion. It is good that, no, so let my children see that I am also a sinner who is saved by the grace of God. So we will end at this junction, and this is the first episode, and your prayers are required for us to take this topic further. And Paul Tripp has written a beautiful book, and where he really shows the ambassadorial parenting and the ownership parenting. So by ownership parenting, he means that the parents are the owners for the children and the repercussions of it. By ambassadorial parenting, he means that children are given to the hands of the parents as gifts, as weapons to be shot. And the parents take on the stewardship role, and they fail and they receive their strength from God. And they also show the redemption story to people, and that is the best way to parent the children. So just think about it, and thank you so much for watching this episode.